With a single phone call, I could obliterate your livelihood. That's the measure of your existence in this town. Sheriff Daniel Cross's son spat those venomous words before his boot connected with her stomach, sending her sprawling onto the unforgiving tiles. Her uniform, once a symbol of authority, was now torn, her dignity seeping away with each shallow breath. As she struggled for air, his accomplice scurried to disable the security cameras, desperate to erase any trace of their brutality. The world had always turned a blind eye to monsters like them, allowing them to roam free, but tonight the familiar rules were about to be shattered. Emerging from the inky shadows were two imposing figures, leather vests adorned with menacing insignia, scars that told stories of battles fought and won, the unmistakable mark of the Hell's Angels. Suddenly, these outlaws, these societal pariahs, became the unlikely guardians of justice. The events that unfolded next transcended a mere act of defiance against a bully. They threatened to expose the carefully constructed facade of an entire town. Do you crave to witness the downfall of this untouchable golden boy, to see him finally face the consequences of his actions? Then keep watching and tell me, are you viewing this spectacle on a phone, a tablet, or the cold, unblinking screen of your television? The supermarket at 11 p.m. possessed an eerie resonance. Each beep of the scanner echoed, amplified by the silence, lingering longer than it should have. Every footstep seemed to carry a weight, a question hanging in the air that no one dared to answer. The late-night shift always evoked this feeling, not just quiet, but vulnerable, exposed to the unseen. Lily Jenkins stood guard behind the counter, her shoulders slightly stooped, her gaze fixed on a well-worn paperback tucked discreetly beneath the register. At 18, she possessed a slender frame, a consequence of skipped meals rather than a deliberate fashion statement. Fatigue etched lines around her eyes, yet a spark of sharp intelligence flickered within, a focus honed by the harsh realities of survival. She devoured a paragraph, then swiftly concealed the book, glancing at the clock. 12 minutes until closing time. She had learned the unforgiving rules of this world early on. Keep your head down, adhere to policy without question. Don't give anyone a reason to notice you, to target you. The automatic doors hissed open, shattering the fragile stillness. Lily Jenkins looked up, her senses on high alert. Aaron Cross sauntered in, his gait suggesting he owned the place. 17, privileged, draped in designer clothes worn with a studied carelessness, the kind that screamed money could effortlessly replace anything that suffered damage. The olfactory assault hit first, alcohol clinging to his breath like a desperate lover, layered over stale cigarettes and cheap cologne, a feeble attempt to mask both. His steps were uneven, loud, a blatant display of disrespect in a space that had been silent out of courtesy, not vacancy. He didn't acknowledge Lily Jenkins initially. He grabbed a pack of cigarettes from the display near the counter and flicked it forward. It skidded across the polished surface, halting mere inches from her outstretched hand. Next came the coins. Not placed with consideration, but hurled with disdain, they clattered against the counter, a few bouncing off and striking her wrist before scattering onto the floor. A lone dime rolled to a stop near her worn-out shoe. Lily Jenkins remained impassive, her expression betraying nothing. She had been meticulously trained to suppress any outward reaction. She retrieved the cigarette pack, scanned it, then stated calmly, "I'll need to see your ID." Aaron Cross erupted in laughter, a short, sharp burst that conveyed his utter contempt for the request itself. He leaned an elbow on the counter, his eyes finally meeting her gaze. "Seriously? You've got to be kidding me. Everyone in this town knows who I am." "I still need to see your ID," Lily Jenkins repeated, her voice unwavering, maintaining a neutral tone. The voice of policy, devoid of personal opinion. Aaron Cross's smile twisted into a sneer. He reached into his pocket, not to produce identification but to flaunt his perceived authority. He withdrew his hand empty and shrugged. "Nah," he drawled. "I'm good. Lily Jenkins shook her head once, a subtle gesture of defiance. "I can't sell these without an ID." Something shifted in the air, a palpable change. Not overt anger yet, but something colder, more menacing. He straightened, looming over the counter, his eyes narrowing as if he were scrutinizing a defective object. "You really want to do this?" he asked, his tone laced with disbelief. "Over a pack of smokes?" "It's store policy," she replied, her voice still steady. "I don't make the rules." Aaron Cross snorted derisively. "That's funny. You actually believe that?" He leaned closer, invading her personal space. Lily Jenkins could now detect the full force of the alcohol on his breath, feel the heat radiating from him as he breached an invisible boundary, one no camera could ever capture. Her hand subtly edged toward the panic button concealed beneath the counter, not pressing it, merely acknowledging its presence, a fragile reassurance. "I said I don't have to show you anything," he continued, his voice low and menacing. "So ring it up." "I can't," Lily Jenkins reiterated, her resolve unwavering. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. Somewhere in the depths of the store, a freezer hummed, its monotonous drone a stark contrast to the escalating tension. A receipt printer whirred briefly, then fell silent. Aaron Cross's jaw tightened, his face hardening. He reached forward and tapped the scanner with one finger. "This little thing," he sneered, "isn't going to tell me what to do." Lily Jenkins met his gaze, her eyes betraying a flicker of something he hadn't anticipated. Not fear, but determination. "I'm not selling you cigarettes," she stated firmly. "If you don't have ID, I'll have to ask you to leave." That was the breaking point. Aaron Cross unleashed another laugh, louder this time, turning his head as if seeking an audience. He spread his arms wide, nearly toppling a display of candy bars. "Did you hear that?" he called out to the empty aisles, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "She's asking me to leave." He stepped back, then surged forward again, testing her boundaries, probing for weakness. His gaze dropped briefly to her uniform, to the name tag pinned just above her heart. "Lily Jenkins," he read aloud, savoring the sound of her name. "Cute name." She didn't respond. "Bet you're good at following rules," he added, his tone laced with condescension. "Girls like you always are." The words were coated in a smirk, but the underlying meaning was sharp and deliberate, intended to wound. Lily Jenkins's fingers curled tighter against the counter, her knuckles whitening. She kept her eyes fixed forward, refusing to cower. "Sir," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest, "I'm closing soon. If you're not making a purchase, you need to go." Aaron Cross leaned in until his face was mere inches from hers. His voice dropped, soft but venomous. "You don't tell me when I leave," he hissed. "You don't tell me anything." She held her ground, refusing to yield. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she didn't flinch, didn't step back. "I'm asking you to leave," she repeated, her voice unwavering. For a fleeting moment he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his lips twisted, not into a genuine smile, but something closer to a sneer, a grotesque parody of amusement. He lowered his head until she could feel his breath against her cheek and whispered, his voice laced with malice, "In this town, I make the rules, not you, and not your busted barcode machine." The words lingered in the air long after he pulled away, a toxic cloud of entitlement and contempt. Lily Jenkins's hand tightened into a fist beneath the counter, her knuckles white with tension as a primal instinct took hold deep within her chest. A warning she couldn't articulate, only felt. A storm was brewing, gathering force with each passing second. For several agonizing heartbeats, nothing moved except the red digital clock above the registers, its numbers flickering relentlessly toward midnight, the witching hour. But then Aaron Cross turned his back on the counter and began drifting through the aisles, his movements slow and deliberate. He moved like a predator patrolling his territory, scanning for weakness, for any sign of fear. Lily Jenkins kept her eyes fixed on him, refusing to betray her anxiety, even as her insides coiled tighter with apprehension. Aaron Cross wandered deeper into the aisles, dragging his fingers across the neatly arranged rows of candy, chips and canned beans, like a bored prince surveying his kingdom. His shoes squeaked deliberately against the linoleum, each sound a calculated act of provocation. He eyed the overhead cameras, a smirk playing on his lips, then shoved his shoulder into a display of soda bottles. One rolled free, thudded to the floor, and spun in a lazy circle before coming to rest. "Oops," he called out, his voice dripping with false innocence. "You should really stack those better." Lily Jenkins gritted her teeth, fighting to maintain her composure. She stepped around the counter, stooped to pick up the bottle, replaced it on the shelf, and deliberately ignored his taunting gaze. But Aaron Cross had already moved on, his attention drawn to a new target. He knocked a box of cereal off the shelf with the back of his hand, then another, each thud sharper and more jarring than the last. His chaos was casual, calculated, designed to provoke a reaction, daring her to object. "Stop," Lily Jenkins said, the word forced from her lips. "That's enough." He grinned, reveling in her distress. "You like cleaning up after people, don't you? Bet you're really good at it." She bent to retrieve the fallen boxes, her cheeks burning with humiliation, forcing herself to remain calm. He circled her, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his steps slow and measured. "You know, I've seen you before," he said, his voice dropping to a low drawl. "Didn't think a girl like you would be working here this late. Guess you really need the money, huh?" "Figures." She rose, maintaining a safe distance between them. "Please respect the store. If you're not buying anything, you need to leave soon." He laughed, the sound grating on her nerves. "Leave? Not yet. This night's just getting fun." He moved closer, invading her personal space, and Lily Jenkins tensed, bracing herself for what she knew was coming. He lowered his voice, making every word crawl under her skin like a venomous insect. "You got a nice smile, you know that?" he said, his tone suddenly syrupy, dripping with insincerity. "For someone your color, I mean. Not everyone pulls that off." She flinched, a tremor barely visible, but enough for him to notice. Aaron Cross's smile widened, feeding on her discomfort. He leaned in, his eyes roaming over her body, his gaze invasive and hungry. "You ever get tired of working here all alone? I bet you do. I bet you dream about a rich guy like me coming to rescue you from all this boring trash." Lily Jenkins's grip tightened on the hem of her uniform, her knuckles white. "I'm not interested in this conversation," she stated, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm. He laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed through the empty store. "Don't flatter yourself," he sneered, "but you know, if you played your cards right, maybe you'd end up with something better than that old uniform and name tag." He reached for a pack of gum, tore it open with unnecessary force, and shoved a piece into his mouth, chewing loudly as he surveyed the wreck he had created. Crumpled wrappers, toppled snacks, her dignity chipped away in increments. Lily Jenkins retreated behind the counter, desperately searching for anything that could provide a sense of order, a rule to cling to, a wall between herself and him. She cleared her throat, attempting to project an air of calm she didn't feel. "The store is closing soon. You'll have to leave." He moved in, closing the gap, trapping her. His breath reeked of whiskey and stale mint. "Don't tell me what to do, Lily Jenkins," he hissed, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Nobody's coming in here this late except me. You want to call your manager? Go ahead. Maybe they'll take your side, or maybe they'll just remember who my dad is." She didn't answer, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her hands trembled, but she kept them visible, a silent act of defiance. He leaned on the counter, elbows wide, looming over her, his posture designed to intimidate. "You're lucky, you know. Some girls would kill for a chance to talk to a guy like me. But I'm a generous guy. Tell you what, smile for me, and I'll make sure you keep this job. Or don't, and I'll make a call. Your choice." Lily Jenkins forced her jaw to remain shut, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She felt the pressure of unshed tears building behind her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. "I'm closing the store in 5 minutes. Please finish your shopping or leave." Aaron Cross's smirk faded, replaced by something more venomous, a raw and unrestrained hatred. He stood silent, staring her down, his gaze heavy as stone, as if trying to crush her with the sheer force of his will. Then he noticed the book peeking out from under the register, a beacon of hope in the oppressive darkness. He snatched it up before she could react, his movements lightning fast. "What's this?" he mocked, holding the book high above his head, out of her reach. He flipped it over, reading the spine aloud. "College prep. Princeton, huh? You aiming big, huh?" He turned to a random page, sneered in disgust, then spat a wet wad of gum onto the paper, the sound echoing loudly in the deathly silence. "You really think you're scholar material?" His voice dripped with poison, each word a carefully aimed barb. "People like you don't end up in schools like that. Maybe cleaning the bathrooms. Maybe—" Lily Jenkins's breath hitched in her throat, a strangled sob threatening to escape. She stared at the ruined book, at the bright white gum marring her hopes and dreams, at the hands that had so carelessly destroyed the only thing she cherished. Before she could speak, the bell above the door chimed, but it was not a customer entering, not tonight. In the reflection of the glass doors, Lily Jenkins saw the silhouettes of two teenage boys loitering outside, their hands buried deep in their hoodies, their faces obscured by the shadows cast by the neon lights. Ethan Moore and Ryan Moore, Aaron Cross's ever-present accomplices. Their presence was not a source of protection, but a clear and ominous warning. Inside, the air seemed to grow heavier, thicker with dread. Aaron Cross, emboldened by the show of backup, swaggered back toward the counter, every movement calculated to assert his dominance and claim territory. He paused to deliberately knock over a row of batteries, the small boxes tumbling to the ground with a sharp, brittle rattle that shattered the remaining silence. He laughed, a loud, derisive sound that bounced off the empty shelves, mocking her helplessness. Lily Jenkins straightened, concealing the tremor in her hands by clutching her phone tightly. "Enough," she said, her voice trembling but firm. She opened her home screen, her thumb hovering over the emergency call button, her finger poised to dial. Aaron Cross noticed, his grin widening, twisting into something predatory wolfish. "Go ahead, call your heroes," he taunted, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. Lily Jenkins didn't waver, refusing to back down. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the police." From the doorway, Ethan Moore cupped his hands around his mouth and hollered, "Yo, Aaron Cross, you want us to come in or what?" Ryan Moore, smaller and twitchier than his companion, shifted nervously from foot to foot, scanning the parking lot with darting eyes. Aaron Cross ignored them, his attention fixed solely on Lily Jenkins. He leaned both elbows on the counter, his body blocking her path, trapping her. "You really want to call the cops on me?" he sneered. "On Aaron Cross?" She said nothing, her silence a testament to her fear and resolve. Her eyes burned with a mix of terror and defiance, a desperate plea for help that would likely go unanswered. Aaron Cross let the moment hang in the air, savoring her fear, then burst out laughing, a sound so manic it bordered on hysterical. "You got guts, I'll give you that," he said, wiping a tear from his eye. He fished his wallet out of his pocket, flicking it open with a practiced snap, as if he were about to flash $100 bill. Instead, he angled it so she and the security cameras could clearly see a plastic badge. Not a police badge, but a laminated card stamped with the sheriff's gold seal and the words "Immediate Family Access County Sheriff's Department." The badge glinted mockingly under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of his untouchability, a shield against any consequences. He drew it back with a flourish, then tapped it lightly against her knuckles, his touch smug and deliberate. "You know what that is?" he asked, his tone dripping with arrogance and disdain. "That means my dad is Sheriff Daniel Cross. This whole town runs on his say-so. So go ahead, call 911. Guess who picks up?" The truth landed with brutal finality, crushing her hopes and leaving her breathless. Lily Jenkins's stomach dropped. the world narrowing to the cheap laminate badge and the boy's cold blue eyes devoid of any empathy. Aaron Cross leaned in closer, his voice low and venomous, his words like shards of glass. "You think the rules matter out here? The only law is my father's law. You're not going to get anyone riled up over a little misunderstanding." From outside, Ethan Moore pressed his face against the glass, grinning obscenely, making crude gestures like he was performing for a carnival show. Ryan Moore kept his hands jammed in his pockets, glancing back at the street every few seconds, his nervousness palpable, but he remained silent. Lily Jenkins's thumb hovered over the emergency number, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked at Aaron Cross, weighing her choices, searching his face for any trace of humanity, any hint of remorse. There was none. The mask of arrogant humor had completely slipped, revealing the cold, calculating monster beneath. What was left was something predatory, something sharpened by years of getting away with everything, of facing no consequences for his actions. "Come on, Lily Jenkins," Aaron Cross taunted, pronouncing her name with the contempt of a judge reading a sentence. "You want to test your luck? You really think anyone's coming to help you tonight?" She stared at the badge, then at her own reflection in the plexiglass, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion, resolve, and the bitter knowledge of how these stories usually ended for girls like her. Outside, Ethan Moore banged a fist against the door, sending a hollow thud through the store, the sound echoing like a death knell. "Let's get this party started, man," he yelled, his voice slurred. Aaron Cross raised the badge closer to her face, so close she could see the scratches from years of use, the imperfections that only made it seem more menacing. "Go ahead," he said, almost gently, his voice laced with mock concern. "Call for help. My dad will be real interested to hear your version of events." Lily Jenkins's hand faltered, her resolve crumbling. The phone felt suddenly heavy in her hand, like a weight pulling her down into the floor, trapping her. She remembered every lesson her grandfather had ever imparted to her. Don't make trouble, don't give them a reason, never let them see you break. But what do you do when the whole system is rigged against you, built to watch you fall, to ensure your defeat? She slowly lowered the phone, defeat and fury warring within her chest, tearing her apart. The threat was real, the danger palpable. The game was rigged, the odds stacked against her. Aaron Cross watched her, his eyes gleaming with triumph, sensing the shift in power, the moment when her spirit finally broke. The look on his face changed, the facade of amusement vanishing completely. Only the raw, unadulterated thrill of a hunter who knows his prey is cornered remained. Outside, Ethan Moore turned to Ryan Moore, mouthing something inaudible. Ryan Moore slipped away from the window, ducking into the shadows, heading toward the back of the store, where the old, outdated security cameras watched silently, their lenses recording everything. Aaron Cross noticed Lily Jenkins' hesitation, her moment of despair. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper, his words dripping with venomous satisfaction. "Smart choice." He snapped his fingers in the air, signaling Ethan Moore and Ryan Moore. "Hey, kill the cameras." A slow, predatory smile crept across his face, a smile that promised pain and humiliation. The mask was gone, shattered into a million pieces. Only the darkness remained, the raw, unrestrained evil that he had so carefully concealed for so long. The moment the lights above the register flickered and died, plunging the immediate area into shadow, something fundamental shifted, a point of no return. No more witnesses, no more pretense, only shadows and the promise of violence. Aaron Cross, no longer hiding behind a facade of charm and privilege, was finally free to unleash the monster within. Beneath a veneer of adolescent swagger, Aaron Cross let the cruelty festering in his eyes bloom, unchecked and virulent. He moved with predatory grace behind the counter, breaching the invisible boundary that separated the realm of customer from that of cashier, the hunter from his cornered prey. Lily Jenkins felt the cold press of the wall against her back, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps, her fists clenched so tightly that her nails drew blood from her palms, a sharp, stinging sensation she refused to acknowledge, refused to betray. The corner felt less like a refuge and more like the confines of a coffin, each breath a reminder of her impending doom. Aaron Cross stood as her only barrier to freedom. His body seemed to loom, larger than life, each deliberate step ratcheting up the tension in the small space. "This is the part where you beg, right?" he sneered, the threat in his voice undisguised, a venomous barb aimed to wound. "You people are always so tough, until it actually matters." Lily Jenkins felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly followed by a fierce, defiant anger. She met his gaze head-on, her eyes steady and unyielding. "Get out from behind here," she warned, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "I'm warning you." Aaron Cross's smile twisted into a grotesque mockery of genuine warmth. "Hungry for the sweet taste of humiliation, or what? You'll scream? You'll run to Daddy? You don't get it, do you?" His words lashed out at her, each syllable designed to diminish, to erase her sense of self-worth. "Nobody's coming for you, Lily Jenkins. Not tonight." With a sudden, swift movement, his hand shot out and seized her arm in a bruising grip. Instinct screamed. Lily Jenkins reacted without thinking, jerking away and slamming her elbow into his ribs, surprising him and perhaps even herself with the sheer ferocity of her resistance. He let out a grunt, his grip tightening as he shoved her backward, her head hitting the wall with a sickening thud. She gasped, but refused to give him the satisfaction of a sob. Aaron Cross's temper flared, a dangerous fire igniting in his eyes. He grabbed her wrist and yanked, trying to wrench her away from the wall, but she twisted and fought back with every ounce of strength she possessed, scratching his hand, her nails raking across his skin. Thin lines of blood welled up, a testament to her desperate struggle. His eyes burned with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. "You stupid little," he spat, swinging his other arm in a wide arc. The blow landed squarely in her stomach, doubling her over, stealing her breath. Lily Jenkins dropped to her knees, arms wrapped protectively around her midsection, retching from the pain that threatened to consume her. Still, she glared up at him, her voice shaking but sharp as a shard of glass. "You hit girls now, Aaron Cross? That how your sheriff daddy raised you? You going to tell the whole town you beat up a girl half your size?" Her words found their mark, hitting him where it hurt. Aaron Cross's expression darkened. He bent down, grabbed her by the collar of her uniform, his fingers digging into the fabric. "You think you're better than me? You think rules make you strong?" His knuckles whitened as he tightened his grip. Lily Jenkins spat at his shoe, trembling but unbroken, her spirit refusing to be crushed. "You're nothing but a coward. All that power, and you need to hurt someone who can't even fight back." His face twisted in a mask of pure rage. In a lightning-fast motion, he jerked her upward and slammed her against the sharp edge of the register. One hand balled her uniform in a tight fist, while the other clawed at the buttons. With a guttural snarl, he yanked hard. The sound, the sharp, ugly rip of fabric tearing, echoed through the silent store, louder than any siren. Lily Jenkins' shirt tore open, leaving her exposed, her dignity shredded along with the cloth. She gasped, her arms flying up to cover herself, cheeks wet with sudden, uncontrollable tears. A wave of shame and humiliation washed over her, burning hotter than any physical pain. Aaron Cross loomed above her, breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on the ruined uniform with a sick satisfaction. "That's more like it," he sneered, his voice almost gleeful. "See, you're not so tough now." But Lily Jenkins, even curled on the ground, found the strength to speak. "You think this makes you strong?" she whispered, her voice raw and hoarse. "It just makes you small." He stepped closer, raising his foot for a final vicious kick. But even as Lily Jenkins flinched, crossing her arms to shield her head, her spirit refused to break. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact, hatred and sorrow swirling together into something resembling defiance. Outside, the world remained oblivious to her suffering. The streets were silent, save for the distant roar of motorcycles, a promise the night itself did not yet understand. And inside that supermarket, as Aaron Cross prepared to finish his dark work, He had no idea that in the shadows beyond those fluorescent lights, something was shifting. Forces he could not comprehend, drawn by the violence he had unleashed. The sound of heavy boots thudding against the linoleum cut through the haze of violence and humiliation like a knife. At first, Aaron Cross didn't notice, too consumed by the thrill of unchecked power over the girl cowering beneath him. Two men emerged from the darkness between the aisles, their mere presence causing a palpable shift in the energy of the store. Titan Wolf was the first to appear, an imposing figure in his late 60s, his shoulders as broad as a barn door, his silver hair flowing wild over a jaw marked by old scars and hard living. His battered leather vest bore the infamous Hell's Angels death head patch, stitched with the faded names of battles fought far from the sterile aisles of this supermarket. Behind him walked Blade Carson, a silent mountain of muscle, his face a granite mask beneath a hooded gaze, his arms crossed as if daring anyone to make a move. They looked utterly out of place in this fluorescent world of cheap snacks and lottery tickets, yet there was nothing ridiculous about their presence. If anything, they made the harsh lights feel colder, more real, as if exposing the rot beneath the surface. Titan Wolf paused at the end of the aisle, still clutching a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread, mundane purchases juxtaposed against the unfolding drama. He took in the scene, his eyes narrowed and assessing. Lily Jenkins's torn uniform, her arms crossed in shame, her cheek flushed from more than just pain. Aaron Cross's foot, frozen midair, ready to strike. For a long, tense heartbeat, no one moved, the air thick with unspoken threats and suppressed rage. Then Titan Wolf's voice broke the spell, deep, graveled, seasoned by decades of command and countless miles on the open road. "That's enough, kid." Aaron Cross spun around, startled, but quick to recover his arrogance. The cruelty in his face twisted into a sneer as he sized up the two newcomers. "Get out of here, you dirty trash," he spat, his voice brittle with false bravado. "This is my business. Back off before I call the cops." Titan Wolf calmly set the groceries on the counter, folding his arms with deliberate patience. He didn't flinch at the threat. Blade Carson's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching at his sides, a silent promise of violence barely contained. Aaron Cross straightened, trying to regain his lost dominance. He looked them up and down, sneering at their patched leather and faded tattoos. "Figures people like you would come out at night. Got nothing better to do but cause trouble?" Blade Carson said nothing. He simply walked forward, slow and silent, the sheer weight of his presence filling the space, pushing Aaron Cross back, step by inevitable step. Before Aaron Cross could utter another insult, Blade Carson's fist shot out, an uppercut honed by years of hard living and harder fights. It caught Aaron Cross squarely on the jaw with a sickening thud that echoed across the empty aisles, a dull, brutal crack that spoke of broken bones and shattered illusions. Aaron Cross's body sailed backward, limbs flailing, crashing into a rack of liquor bottles that toppled in a glittering, destructive avalanche. He crumpled to the floor, glass and booze pooling around his head, the dazed expression on his face replacing all the previous bravado. Titan Wolf stepped forward and gently knelt beside Lily Jenkins, his face softening as he assessed her wounds. She recoiled at first, frightened by his size and the ominous patches on his jacket, but his movements were careful, almost paternal. He unzipped his own jacket, the heavy Hell's Angels emblem catching the light, and draped it around her shoulders, shielding her from view, providing a small measure of comfort and protection. The leather hung on her like armor, heavy and strangely comforting. "You're safe now, kid," he murmured, not expecting her to believe him, but needing her to hear it, needing to offer some semblance of solace in the midst of her trauma. Lily Jenkins stared up at him, tears streaming down her face, unsure whether to trust him. But the warmth of the jacket, the scent of old road and oil felt unexpectedly reassuring, a small beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. Blade Carson circled back, cracking his knuckles, standing guard over the shattered boy on the floor. Aaron Cross, now bleeding from the mouth, pushed himself up on shaky hands, Fury and humiliation warred in his eyes. "You," he choked, spitting blood. "You're dead. You hear me? My dad's the sheriff. You just messed with the wrong family." Titan Wolf stood tall, silent, his gaze unwavering. The room was quiet except for Aaron Cross's ragged breath and the dripping of spilled whiskey. Aaron Cross lunged at Titan Wolf in a final, pathetic attempt at control. Blade Carson sidestepped easily, delivering another swift blow, this time to the ribs. Aaron Cross collapsed, groaning, the fight completely gone from his body. No more threats, no more arrogance, just a broken and defeated boy crumpled on the linoleum. Titan Wolf held up a hand, his voice steady as stone. "That's enough, Blade Carson." Blade Carson nodded, backing off, his face betraying neither satisfaction nor pity. Aaron Cross curled up, whimpering, clutching his stomach, the world he'd ruled with impunity crumbling around him in an instant. Lily Jenkins, wrapped in Titan Wolf's jacket, watched him with a mixture of fear and pity. For a moment she almost felt sorry for him, a prince stripped of his crown by two men the world called outlaws. Titan Wolf leaned down and met Aaron Cross's eyes, a cold wisdom flickering there. "You pick on someone half your size, you better be ready for someone your own weight." Aaron Cross tried to snarl, but the pain stole his words. Titan Wolf's eyes lingered on Aaron Cross, then drifted to Lily Jenkins. For a heartbeat, his gruff features softened with something akin to recognition, a connection old and unspoken. Then he turned away, a hidden story flickering in his gaze, a suggestion of battles fought and losses endured. As the night pressed closer around them, heavy and thick, moonlight fought through the clouds over a barren parking lot 2 miles from the supermarket. The distant neon lights of the highway buzzed faint and cold. Aaron Cross hunched beside his car, an ice pack pressed to his throbbing jaw, his breath coming in short, angry bursts. Shards of glass and torn receipts littered the footwell, grim reminders of the chaos he had just fled. Ethan Moore paced in tight, frantic circles, his hoodie pulled up over his head, obscuring his face. Ryan Moore sat slumped on the curb, his knees drawn up to his chest, rocking slightly as if by shrinking into himself he could somehow make the world disappear. None of them spoke for a long while, only the sound of Aaron Cross's angry muttering, the slap of the ice pack against his swollen jaw, and the rhythmic thud of Ethan Moore's shoes on the asphalt broke the oppressive silence. Finally, Ethan Moore couldn't take it anymore. "Man, we gotta go home. This is insane. You saw those patches? Hell's Angels, dude. That's like real-life outlaw stuff. You don't mess with them, ever." Aaron Cross didn't look up. Instead, he lashed out in frustration, smacking the side mirror of his car, sending it spinning wildly. "They're nothing, just trash with bikes and bad tattoos. I could have taken them if they hadn't sucker punched me." Ryan Moore didn't answer, but he glanced nervously at Ethan Moore, his eyes wide with unease. "Seriously, Aaron Cross, you're bleeding. Maybe we should just drop it, okay? Let it go before it gets worse." Aaron Cross shot him a look that could freeze hell, cold and contemptuous. Worse. For who? For us or for them? Ethan Moore stopped pacing. For all of us. "You know what happens if word gets around? My dad already thinks I'm a screw-up. You want to get my whole family on some biker death list?" Aaron Cross let out a harsh, mirthless laugh that echoed in the night. "Nobody's getting on a list. You guys don't get it. This is my town. My dad runs every cop, every judge, every news station. That's not going to change because some washed-up bikers want to play hero." Ryan Moore swallowed hard, his voice barely more than a whisper. "What about the girl?" Aaron Cross's face hardened, all traces of vulnerability vanishing. He pressed the ice harder to his bruised jaw, savoring the pain, letting it fuel his anger. "She'll get what's coming. Trust me." A thick, suffocating silence settled over them, heavy as fog. Then, without warning, Aaron Cross threw the ice pack to the ground, shattering it and sending ice chips skittering across the asphalt. His anger shifted, its flavor changing from raw rage to something colder, more calculating. He grinned, the split in his lip oozing a bead of blood. "You want to know the real reason I'm not worried? He turned to face them, his eyes glittering with a twisted certainty. My dad's not just the sheriff, he's about to be the next state senator. Ryan Moore stared, his face blank. What does that even mean? Aaron Cross straightened, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, a predatory gleam in his eye. It means he needs a good story. A story about how this town is overrun with criminals, how the lawless, the bikers, the outsiders, and yeah, the wrong kind of people are ruining everything decent. Ethan Moore's expression soured. You're not talking about, you can't. Aaron Cross cut him off, his voice now smooth as silk and just as poisonous. I'm going to give him exactly what he needs. Look at me. He gestured to his battered face, the bruises blooming along his arms. A sheriff's son attacked by a biker gang and some thug cashier. Perfect. He'll eat it up. The papers will run with it. And every old fool in this county will line up to vote for a man who cleaned up the streets. Ethan Moore took a step back, visibly disturbed. You're really going to lie about all of it? Lie? Aaron Cross's smile widened, revealing a chilling emptiness. It's not a lie if no one believes her or them. Who are they going to believe? The son of the sheriff or a girl who works the graveyard shift at a supermarket and a couple of tattooed felons? Ryan Moore tried to interject, his voice trembling with fear, but Aaron Cross silenced him with a single withering glare. I don't care what really happened. I care about the story. We're going to say those freaks tried to rob the store, that I tried to protect it, and they beat me half to death. The girl, she was in on it, casing the place, letting them in. She's the inside man or woman, whatever. He began tearing at his shirt, ripping the sleeve further, scraping his skin against the rough edge of the door frame until it bruised and bled. I'll show the cops. They'll buy it. They'll buy anything my dad tells them to buy. Ethan Moore shook his head in disbelief. Aaron Cross, this is insane. Aaron Cross stepped up, getting right in Ethan Moore's face, his voice low and lethal. No, this is politics. It's a legacy. My dad's building a kingdom, and I'm his best weapon. I'm not just going to get revenge. I'm going to turn them into the rungs on his ladder to the Senate. Ryan Moore hugged his knees tighter, whispering, his voice filled with despair. This is wrong. You're going to destroy her life. Aaron Cross's expression didn't soften, not even a fraction. No one will remember her name after this. She'll be a footnote, a mugshot, a warning. He reached for his phone, already composing the story in his head, meticulously crafting a narrative of lies and deceit. As he dialed, his voice turned mocking, gleeful, relishing the power he wielded. Watch and learn. This is how power works in America. He paused, tearing his shirt further, smearing a little of his own blood across his cheek, meticulously crafting an image of brutal victimization for the inevitable cameras. Then, with his free hand, he dialed 911. Help! He wailed, his voice trembling with artificial panic. There's been an attack. Hell's Angels. They tried to rob the store. I tried to stop them, but they beat me. Please send help. He ended the call and looked at his friends with savage triumph. I'm not just getting even. I'm making them famous for all the wrong reasons. And I'm making sure my dad becomes untouchable. His smile was that of a viper, cold, venomous, and utterly convinced that the world was his for the taking. Dawn broke over Crestwood, but for Lily Jenkins there was no sunrise, only the jarring white of fluorescent lights and the steady, cold drip of 4S in the sterile confines of the hospital. She lay motionless on a paper-thin mattress, her ribs aching from the brutal impact of Aaron Cross's boots. Every sound, the clatter of trays, the squeak of nurses' shoes seemed magnified, too loud for a morning that felt both unreal and all too familiar, a recurring nightmare playing out in agonizing detail. She had barely closed her eyes when the voices arrived, loud and harsh, not gentle, not concerned, but barked commands, punctuated by the ominous clink of handcuffs. 2 police officers in dark blue uniforms filled the doorway, their hands already resting on their belts, radiating an aura of authority and impending threat. Lily Jenkins, one of them demanded, his voice devoid of any warmth. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault and robbery. Stand up now. Lily Jenkins' pulse hammered in her ears, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of panic. What? That's not... I was attacked." They ignored her desperate pleas, their faces impassive and unyielding. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, a symbol of her loss of freedom and the injustice that was about to befall her. As she was hauled upright, a searing pain shot through her side, the memory of Aaron Cross's brutal kicks flooding back with sickening clarity. She looked around desperately for someone, anyone, to help her, but the nurses avoided her gaze, quietly slipping away, unwilling to become entangled in whatever was unfolding. The badge on the officer's chest read, "Deputy Miller," a name whispered through the town as the sheriff's most loyal fixer, the man who cleaned up whatever messes money and politics left behind, the enforcer who ensured that the sheriff's will was always done. A thin hospital blanket was all that shielded Lily Jenkins from complete humiliation. As they dragged her away, a lamb led to the slaughter, trapped in a web of lies and power she couldn't hope to escape. Patients and staff in the ward watched Lily's procession in hushed silence. Some were merely curious, others openly judgmental, while a few offered pity tinged with a fear of involvement. Outside, the hospital parking lot buzzed with morning news vans, cameras trained and ready to capture the unfolding drama. Deputy Mark Hale, his face a mask of professional detachment, handed Lily off to another officer, then leaned in close, his voice a low, venomous hiss. "You're going to be famous today, sweetheart. Smile for the folks at home." Her grandfather, Henry Jenkins, propelled his battered wheelchair forward as fast as the failing machine would allow. He reached the curb just as Lily was being bundled into the back of the patrol car. "That's my granddaughter!" the old man cried out, his voice cracking with desperation. "She didn't do anything! Leave her be!" But his pleas were swallowed by the gathering commotion. An officer stepped in front of him, blocking his path as the car door slammed shut with a final echoing thud. Inside, Lily's heart plummeted. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, trying to focus on the blur of passing trees and rooftops. Shame, fear, and a strange, bone-deep anger churned within her. This wasn't just about her anymore. She was fighting to be seen as a real person in a world that had already decided her role. At the police station, the system whirred into action with cold, efficient precision, fingerprinting, mugshots, endless paperwork. The air hung heavy with the stale scent of burnt coffee and old rubber bands. Deputy Miller reappeared, this time sporting a thin, cruel smile. "Better get your story straight. The sheriff doesn't like surprises." Lily said nothing. In the cold, sterile holding cell, hours stretched into an eternity, time becoming a cruel trick of the mind. She listened to the monotonous hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant murmur of voices, the insistent ringing of telephones, all part of the machinery that ground people like her into dust. Then, cutting through the silence, a new sound, the blare of a television from somewhere nearby. Lily forced herself to look towards the bars. On the screen, Aaron Cross's face filled the frame, battered and bandaged, his eyes wide with carefully rehearsed innocence. Next to him stood a local news anchor, her voice grave and somber. Tonight, in a shocking act of violence, the sheriff's own son was brutally attacked by members of a notorious biker gang and their alleged accomplice, an 18-year-old cashier with a troubled past. Sources say the assault was premeditated, part of a wave of criminal activity sweeping through our town. They showed photographs, Aaron Cross's conveniently placed wounds, Lily's high school ID, grainy supermarket security footage, carefully edited to cast doubt, painting her as an inside player. As the story unfolded, Lily heard voices from the other cells, snickers, curses, and a few muttered slurs. The guards remained impassive, their silence more damning than any words. The TV was doing their dirty work for them. Miles away, Henry Jenkins watched the same broadcast in his cramped living room, his hands shaking with a mixture of rage and helplessness. He shouted at the television, called the station, begged the reporter to hear the truth. But his pleas went unanswered. The narrative had already been written. The system was a living, breathing entity, vast and relentless, and tonight its jaws had closed around Lily. Later that evening, a woman in an ill-fitting suit appeared outside the cell, a public defender, her briefcase overflowing with files, her eyes rimmed with red from too many sleepless nights and too little hope. She sat down beside Lily, her voice gentle but defeated. "You have options, Lily. I know you say you're innocent, but with the evidence they've stacked up, your best chance is to take a plea. Lesser charges, no trial. You could be out in a year, maybe less." Lily stared at her hands, her fists still raw from clawing for dignity. "What about the truth?" she whispered. The lawyer sighed. "The truth isn't what matters in a place like this. It's what they can prove. And right now they have the story. You're just the headline." Tears threatened to spill over, but Lily blinked them back. She refused to give them that satisfaction. She straightened her spine, imagining it was made of steel. Somewhere beyond these concrete walls, she told herself, someone must have seen what really happened. Someone must care. Meanwhile, at the clubhouse on the edge of town, news of her arrest crackled through the smoky air. Bikers watched the television in silence, their faces grim, their eyes burning with a dangerous resolve. Tonight, the system had drawn first blood, but the fight was far from over. The Hells Angels clubhouse pulsed with the chaotic energy only outlaws could conjure. Engines cooling, rock and blues music bleeding from battered speakers, a thick haze of cigarette smoke curling towards the ceiling. But tonight, beneath the bravado and the raucous laughter, a storm was brewing. Titan Wolf sat at the head of a long, scarred wooden table, his hands folded, his eyes distant. Around him, Blade Carson and a dozen other brothers argued in fierce, hushed voices about the events at the supermarket and the repercussions that awaited them. Some clamored for blood, others for a carefully calculated strategy, but most just wanted justice. Blade Carson slammed his fist on the table, silencing the room. "We can't let them do this, Titan. That kid's family controls half the damn county. They'll bury that girl and spit on us for good measure. We can't just sit here." Titan Wolf's gaze remained steady. "You want to go toe-to-toe with the sheriff? March into the jail and start a war?" His tone was calm, but laced with a warning that only those who had witnessed true violence could comprehend. Blade Carson's jaw tightened, his knuckles white. "We're not talking about a war, we're talking about sending a message. The kid, Aaron Cross, he deserves to pay. So do his friends." Other voices chimed in, urging action. "They think they're untouchable. They think they own the law. It ain't just about the girl, it's about all of us." Titan Wolf listened, allowing the anger to circulate, waiting for the opportune moment to speak. Then, without a word, he pulled a worn leather wallet from his pocket and slid a faded black and white photograph across the table. The picture, creased with age, depicted a group of soldiers, battered and mud-soaked, standing in a nameless forest. He tapped a finger on a face at the edge of the photo, a young black man, grinning despite his exhaustion. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant thud of music and the rattle of pipes. "Nearly 50 years ago," Titan Wolf began, his voice low and gravelly, "I was left for dead, shot through, lost in the woods, barely able to crawl. Most of the guys with me ran for the hills, figured I was a goner." He paused, the memory flickering in his eyes. But not him, Henry Jenkins. He found me, slung my arm over his shoulder, and dragged me 10 miles through bramble and mud while shells were dropping all around us. Wouldn't let go even when he got hit himself. Lost his leg that night. The others stared, some having heard war stories before, but never this one, never in this voice, never with this weight. Titan Wolf's hand trembled almost imperceptibly, but his eyes shone with fierce, unshed gratitude. "He didn't just save my life. He made sure I got home, and I swore if I ever had the chance I'd pay that debt." He leaned forward, meeting each man's gaze. "That's why I noticed her at the store, the name on her tag, Lily Jenkins. When I saw her on the ground, saw that look of fear and shame, they tried to make her feel small, tried to break her the way this world always does to people like us and her. But she's Henry Jenkins' granddaughter. That makes her family. Blade Carson, for once, found himself speechless. You're sure? Titan Wolf nodded. He told me stories about his family, about a girl who never gave up. No matter how hard life pushed her, she's got his eyes. That same stubborn streak. He took a shaky breath, steadying himself. It isn't charity, and it isn't justice. It's a blood debt. The mood in the room shifted. The anger morphed into something heavier. Duty, honor, the weight of debts that couldn't be repaid with fists alone. Titan Wolf slammed his hands on the table, rattling bottles and ashtrays. We don't go after them because we're outlaws or because we want revenge. We do it because she's the granddaughter of my brother-in-arms. This is family. This is sacred. Silence hung in the air for a long moment. Then, one by one, the men nodded. Blade Carson stood first, his eyes filled with newfound respect. So, what's next, Titan Wolf? Titan Wolf looked around, the old general re-emerging in his weathered frame. We don't burn down the town, we protect her, we bring her home, and when the world comes looking for a fight, they'll find we stand together like we did back then, and like we will now. The clubhouse sprang to life, not with aimless chaos, but with purpose. A low thunder rolled through boots, engines, and battered hearts. The Hells Angels moved as one, their brotherhood reforged by a promise, an old photograph, and a name that could not be erased. The bail was set impossibly high, but Henry Jenkins refused to let his granddaughter spend another night in a cell designed to crush the innocent. With the help of the local black church and 3 neighbors who remembered the debt they owed Otis from decades past, they scraped together enough to bring Lily home. She walked through the front door just after midnight, flinching as she passed the shattered porch light broken by a rock hurled hours earlier. It wasn't the potential for violence that made Lily tremble, but the humiliation of seeing her family's home targeted. Smeared across the siding in bright, hateful red paint was a single word, the N-word. Henry Jenkins sat on the porch in his old metal wheelchair, a faded wool blanket draped over his knees. The shotgun resting across his lap looked heavy. His hands trembled, but his eyes remained sharp. He watched every passing car, refusing to flinch at the sound of laughter drifting down the block or the rattle of another stone on the driveway. Lily lowered herself onto the top step, pressing her hands to her cheeks to stop herself from crying. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I never wanted any of this." Henry Jenkins shook his head, his voice raspy with age and anger. "You didn't do this, baby. Hate did. Cowardice did." He reached over, placing a weathered hand on hers. "We just got to hold on until morning." She stared out into the darkness, the distant roar of engines unsettling her. "Do you think it'll ever stop?" He smiled, but it was the smile of a man who had witnessed too many false dawns. "Maybe not for me, but for you, maybe. As long as we don't back down." A new sound rose. Unfamiliar, yet unmistakable. Deep, brooding, powerful, like distant thunder. Lily's head snapped up as headlights bloomed at the end of the block. 20 motorcycles, gleaming chrome and black leather, approached in slow procession. Their engines rumbled low, not to intimidate, but to announce their arrival. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering in fear and awe. Some made frantic phone calls, others simply listened, their hearts pounding. The bikes lined the curb in front of the Jenkins house, filling the night with their imposing presence. The men who dismounted were rough and scarred, their jackets bearing the colors of the Hells Angels, but their faces were solemn, their eyes hard with purpose. At their head stood a figure taller than the rest, more imposing under the streetlights than he had been in the supermarket. He moved slowly, respectfully, removing his helmet as he approached the porch. The other bikers fanned out, silent, forming a human barricade stretching from driveway to sidewalk, a warning and a promise. Titan Wolf paused at the foot of the steps, locking eyes with Henry Jenkins. Then, in a gesture so deliberate it silenced even the onlookers, Titan Wolf knelt on one knee before the wheelchair and executed a crisp military salute. Henry Jenkins blinked, stunned, then leaned forward, peering intently. The lines of Titan Wolf's face were deeper, more weathered but unmistakable. The years seemed to melt away. Recognition dawned. The air grew thick with memories of muddy fields, torn uniforms, whispered prayers. "Is that—" Henry Jenkins stammered, his voice breaking. Titan Wolf's voice was rough, almost embarrassed. "Couldn't let the debt go unpaid, Sergeant." With a choked laugh, Henry Jenkins reached out, dropping the old shotgun to the porch boards. His hand trembled as Titan Wolf took it, pressing Henry Jenkins's knuckles to his forehead in the old, wordless language of soldiers. Neither man spoke as tears welled in Henry Jenkins's eyes. "I thought I'd never see you again," he whispered. Titan Wolf shook his head. "You saved my life. Now it's my turn." Lily watched as her grandfather and the biker embraced, the boundaries of race, war, and time dissolving. For a moment, the porch became holy ground. Two old men, one black and one white, bound by blood, and something stronger than the hatred swirling outside. Behind them, the Hell's Angels stood at attention, arms folded, their eyes scanning the shadows. They weren't looking for a fight, they were promising one if it came. Inside the house, Lily's fear began to subside. For the first time in days, she dared to believe she might survive this storm. As Titan Wolf straightened, he placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. "We're not leaving. Not tonight." In the shadows across the street, hidden behind the cracked blinds of a beat-up sedan, Aaron Cross watched the scene unfold through cheap binoculars. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, rage gnawing at him with each passing minute. He muttered curses, grinding his teeth, unable to comprehend how his plan had gone so terribly wrong. "You think you're safe?" he spat. "You're not safe, not yet." But as the night deepened and the engines cooled, the Jenkins home stood surrounded not by fear, but by a new kind of strength. Aaron Cross's eyes burned with jealousy and hate as he watched from afar, plotting his next move. Even with a wall of silent guardians standing between him and the family he sought to destroy, the night hung thick over the Jenkins house, heavy with the threat of violence and the fragile hope of survival. The rumble of motorcycles had faded, replaced by the low murmur of voices, men who kept their promises by standing watch through the darkness. Inside, Lily helped her grandfather wash the hateful red paint from their wall, while Titan Wolf and the other Hell's Angels lingered on the porch and in the yard, smoking in silence, their eyes sharp and watchful. Just beyond the circle of porch light, in the deepest shadow at the edge of the block, a battered Chevy idled, its headlights off. Inside, the blue glow of the dashboard cast two faces in ghostly relief. Aaron Cross hunched over the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight that veins stood out on his neck. Beside him, Ryan Moore looked small and sickly, his hands buried in his hoodie, his legs drawn up as if he could somehow disappear. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were Aaron Cross's heavy breathing and the faint clinking of something rattling in the glove compartment. Finally, Aaron Cross broke the silence. "You see all those bikes? Look at them sitting there like they own the place, like anybody's afraid of them." He spat the words, but his voice trembled with something closer to obsession than fear. Ryan Moore risked a glance at the house, counting the hulking silhouettes lined up on the curb. There's like 20 of them, Aaron. We shouldn't even be here, man. Let's just go." Aaron Cross rounded on him, his eyes blazing. "You want to just give up? Let them win after what they did to me?" Ryan Moore stammered. "I mean, maybe we just leave it. Maybe your dad can handle it some other way. Maybe—" Aaron Cross slammed his fist against the dashboard, making Ryan Moore flinch. "My dad needs a reason to bring them down. He needs proof, evidence. He needs a story the whole county will believe. I'm going to give it to him, and you're going to help." From under the seat, Aaron Cross pulled out a large plastic bag. Inside were brick-like packages pressed tightly together, a stash of drugs sealed, and the word stamped echoed in the tense silence. Each syllable a hammer blow against Sean's composure. his face bleached of all color, leaving him looking ghostly under the dim light filtering through the grimy garage window. "Where did you?" Aaron Cross's grin widened, a predatory baring of teeth that promised nothing but trouble. "From the evidence locker. Genius. Where else would I get something this choice? My old man's got enough confiscated contraband stashed in there to bury half the county. He won't even notice it's gone." Ryan Moore flinched, his horror solidifying into a desperate denial. "No, no way. I'm not doing this." Aaron's tone turned glacial, the jovial mask dissolving to reveal the cold, calculating predator beneath. "They won't catch you if you just do what I say." The threat hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. "Listen up, sneak around back. The cops are watching the front, but they're blind to the alley. Find the mailbox, or that beat-up old van Henry Jenkins is so proud of. Stash the bag where it's sure to be found. That's all you have to do. I'll take care of the rest." Ryan's lips trembled, quivering with suppressed fear. And then what happens? Aaron's smile returned, slow, deliberate, and utterly devoid of warmth. "You call your dad, and they bust everybody. Anonymous tip, drug deal going down at the Jenkins place, biker gang involved, drugs in the mailbox. By the time they figure out what really happened, Lily Jenkins, her old man, those biker thugs, they'll all be cooling their heels in lockup. Problem solved." Ryan's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. "Why me, Aaron? Why not you?" With lightning speed, Aaron's hand shot out, seizing Ryan by the front of his threadbare t-shirt. His other hand, just as swift, produced something from his pocket, a folding knife, the kind every kid in town carried tucked away in his pocket, but few ever dared to use. He pressed the blade, not hard enough to draw blood, but enough to make his point, against Ryan's throat. "Because you owe me, Ryan Moore. Remember that little incident with the freshman? I kept your name out of it. I can just as easily put it back in. You screw this up, you breathe a word of this to anyone, and you're taking the fall for the whole damn thing. They'll believe you did it for the money, or that you wanted revenge." "You got it?" Tears welled in Ryan's eyes, blurring his vision. He nodded frantically, desperate to appease the man holding his life in the balance. Okay, just don't hurt me, please." Aaron released him, shoving the bag of drugs into Ryan's lap. "You want to be a man, Ryan? Here's your chance. Heroes do what's necessary. Don't be a coward now." He leaned in close, his breath hot and sour against Ryan's ear. "You want to be remembered as the traitor or the hero, Ryan? Shove that crap in their mailbox and my dad will sweep the whole street clean." Ryan clutched the bag to his chest, his entire body racked with tremors. In the yard next door, the bikers' laughter drifted through the trees, a sound both fierce and strangely comforting. For one foolish moment, Ryan envied their unwavering loyalty, their certainty. He wished, with a desperate longing, that he could run to them, beg for their protection. But he knew better. He was trapped, caught in a web of his own making, as much by his past mistakes as by Aaron Cross's threats. Aaron leaned back in his seat, his gaze fixed on the Jenkins house with predatory patience. "Go now, and don't screw it up." Ryan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat feeling like a jagged stone. He slipped out of the car, pulling his hood low over his face, clutching the plastic bag against his chest. The grass was damp beneath his sneakers, the night air colder than he'd anticipated. He stuck to the shadows, darting from tree to bush like a frightened animal, his heart pounding so loudly he feared it would betray his presence. Behind him, Aaron Cross watched every move, the moonlight glinting off the knife still clutched in his hand. Reaching the edge of the Jenkins yard, Ryan's nerves stretched as thin as wire. The low hum of motorcycle engines and the murmur of voices helped mask his movements. He crept toward the fence, every shadow a potential threat, every face in the window a silent witness. At the last moment, Ryan hesitated, the weight of the bag feeling like a physical burden in his hands. This wasn't a prank, a teenage game gone wrong. This was the deliberate destruction of a family, a community, maybe even his own soul. His breath caught in his throat, but the memory of the cold steel against his skin, of Aaron Cross's promise of utter ruin, propelled him forward. He waited for a break in the laughter and the sweep of headlights, then pressed himself flat against the ground, beginning to crawl along the fence, inching closer to the mailbox, the van, any hiding place that would seal the trap. Inside the Chevy, Aaron Cross grinned, a viper poised to strike, waiting for his venom to take hold. Ryan crouched beside the back gate, his hands shaking so violently he could barely feel them. Sweat slicked his palms, making the plastic bag dangerously slippery. Every few seconds, he darted a glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see the menacing gleam of a Harley's headlight sweeping the fence, or worse, a pair of hard, suspicious eyes staring through the darkness. He took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing himself to focus. "Just drop it and run," he whispered, repeating Aaron Cross's instructions like a desperate mantra. But the mailbox latch was stuck, rusted solid from years of rain and neglect. He wrenched at it, cursing softly under his breath, and at last, with a protesting creak, the flap sprung open. He stuffed his hand inside, jamming the drugs into the narrow slot. Suddenly, the bag slipped from his trembling fingers, tumbling to the ground, spilling halfway open. Ryan let out a strangled gasp, dropping to his knees to frantically gather the scattered contents. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the entire block could hear it. That's when a shadow moved behind him. A broad, calloused hand, as hard and weathered as old leather, clamped down on Ryan's shoulder, pinning him in place. Ryan froze, his entire body seizing up with terror. He tried to twist away, but the grip held him firm. Blade Carson loomed above him, his boots planted firmly in the dirt, the moonlight catching the hard lines of his face. He wore his cut-off vest over a plain black t-shirt, a faded skull tattoo grinning obscenely from his forearm. For a moment he looked like an executioner summoned straight from Ryan's darkest nightmares. Ryan stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, please, I wasn't..." Blade Carson didn't speak. He simply bent down, picked up the spilled bag, and held it to the light. The pungent chemical scent of the drugs filled the air. He shook his head slowly, with an expression that was more disappointment than anger. "You know what this is, kid?" Ryan nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Why are you here?" The question was flat, devoid of emotion, but heavy with the weight of past mistakes and broken promises. "This your idea?" Ryan shook his head, biting down on his lips so hard he tasted blood. "It was Aaron Cross. He made me. He's in the car down the street. Please don't hurt me. I swear I didn't want to..." Blade Carson crouched down, meeting Ryan's gaze. His eyes were cold but not cruel. "Doing someone else's dirty work. That's how you think a man grows up?" Ryan's resolve crumbled. All the bravado, all the desperate plans he'd clung to, dissolved in a rush of shame and panic. He squeezed his eyes shut, tears streaming down his cheeks. "He threatened me. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just wanted it to stop." Blade Carson let him cry. He didn't scold, didn't hit. He just waited. A silent, unmoving presence, the way a mountain waits for a storm to pass. When the worst of it had subsided, Blade Carson took the drugs and set them on the ground between them. He pulled a battered, old-fashioned tape recorder from his vest pocket, flicked it on, and placed it inches from Ryan's trembling mouth. "Say it again," Blade Carson ordered, his voice low and steady. All of it, from the beginning, every word. Ryan blinked, sniffling, his voice hoarse. "Aaron Cross told me to sneak over here. He gave me that bag. He said if I planted it, he'd call the cops and have Lily Jenkins, Mr. Jenkins, and all the bikers arrested for drugs. He said if I didn't do it, he'd tell everyone something that would ruin me." Blade Carson's voice was as solid as stone. "Who was waiting in the car?" "Aaron Cross Turner. He's down the street right now. Did anyone else know?" Ryan shook his head. "Just us. He said you were all scum, that no one would believe Lily Jenkins, that the sheriff would make sure you all got blamed." Blade Carson switched off the recorder and slipped it back into his pocket. "You're going to be a part of fixing this now, you understand?" Ryan nodded, exhausted and hollow. Please, just don't let him hurt anyone else, or me." Blade Carson rose, towering over Ryan, but for the first time, Ryan saw something behind the biker's steely eyes. Pity, perhaps, or just the tired wisdom of a man who'd seen too many young boys thrown away by men with too much power. "Get up," Blade Carson said, his voice firm. "You're done being a pawn." He nudged Ryan toward the house, toward the faint glow of dawn that was beginning to warm the horizon. Titan Wolf's voice boomed, echoing the oath he and the others had sworn to uphold. "You want to make this about law and order? Fine." He gestured expansively, his gaze sweeping across the phalanx of officers. "The law says you don't get to trample our rights because you're afraid or because you need a convenient story to bury your own mistakes." Each word resonated, carrying across the barricades and amplified by a chorus of microphones. A palpable unease rippled through the assembled crowd, a low murmur that betrayed their collective apprehension. Sheriff Daniel Cross's face contorted in a silent rage. He barked a curt signal. An officer, his voice sharp and devoid of emotion, relayed the order. "SWAT, prepare to move in. Tear gas, on my mark." Nearby, a younger officer, barely more than a boy, stood rigid with nerves. His finger, hovering over the trigger of his weapon, twitched involuntarily. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, remained fixed on the biker contingent, searching for any telltale sign. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and the volatile atmosphere would erupt in violence. Titan Wolf remained a pillar of calm amidst the rising tension, his voice a steady, reassuring presence. The right to assemble, the right to speak, the right to protection from unreasonable search and seizure, these belong to all of us, not just the powerful. He paused, his gaze unwavering. "We're not armed, we're not hiding. If you want Lily Jenkins, you'll have to come through us." He punctuated his words with a stark warning. "But understand this, every camera here, every person in this town is watching what you do next." From the sidewalk, a local reporter, one of the few not beholden to the sheriff's favor, began a live broadcast. His voice, tinged with urgency, cut through the static. "We are witnessing a standoff that could define our county for decades. Tensions are at an all-time high. Both sides are claiming justice. The world is watching." The police line tightened, each officer a statue of grim resolve. Sheriff Cross's voice, amplified by the bullhorn, sliced through the air like a shard of glass. "On my mark." But before he could complete the command, Henry Jenkins moved. The old soldier, a stoic presence in his wheelchair, propelled himself past Titan Wolf, positioning himself directly between the officers and the assembled bikers. On his chest, gleaming under the afternoon sun, was a bronze medal, a testament to courage forged on a battlefield far from Crestwood. It was a symbol of valor that no one present could deny. He locked eyes with the sheriff, his gaze unflinching. In a voice gravelly but resonant with unwavering conviction, he spoke. "If you want to shoot, shoot me first. If you want to silence the truth, do it while I wear this medal." His words hung in the air, heavy with defiance. "But know that every bullet, every baton, every word you use to hurt these kids will echo long after you're gone." A hush descended upon the crowd, silencing the nervous whispers and stifling the rising tide of panic. Even Sheriff Cross hesitated, momentarily thrown off balance by the sheer force of Henry Jenkins's defiance. The young, jittery officer's finger tightened on his trigger, then faltered as he met the unwavering gaze of the old soldier. For a heartbeat, he lowered his weapon. History itself seemed to pause, suspended in a fragile equilibrium. Titan Wolf gently placed a hand on Henry Jenkins's frail shoulder. "You don't have to stand alone," he murmured, his voice barely audible. As if on cue, the bikers and townspeople, a diverse tapestry of black and white, young and old, began to step forward. They raised their arms in a unified gesture of solidarity, their silence speaking volumes. For the first time since the standoff began, Sheriff Daniel Cross looked uncertain. His own deputies exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to advance or hold their ground. The press, emboldened by the shift in momentum, trained their cameras on every trembling face, capturing the raw emotion of the moment. As the sun dipped behind the courthouse, casting long dramatic shadows across the club's battered porch, the tension reached a critical point. One wrong decision could plunge the town into chaos or usher in a new beginning. From the edges of the crowd, independent journalists began to live stream the standoff, broadcasting every word, every gesture to an audience far beyond the confines of Crestwood. The town held its breath, suspended on a razor's edge, waiting to see what would come next. Police radios hissed, crackling with coded messages. The crowd's nervous murmurs ebbed and flowed, rising and falling with every twitch of a trigger finger. Titan Wolf and Henry Jenkins remained side by side, unarmed but unyielding, as the bikers and the Jenkins family braced themselves for whatever the next moment might bring. Sheriff Daniel Cross stood at the head of the police line, his face a rigid mask carved from stone. Behind him, Aaron Cross, his eyes burning with a feverish gleam of triumph, watched the unfolding scene with a sick satisfaction. His father's plan had worked so many times before. Truth, after all, was a malleable thing, and evidence could always be erased. He never saw the real threat coming. Amid the chaos, Lily Jenkins felt her phone vibrate faintly in her pocket. The soft buzz, easily lost in the din of the crowd, was as sharp and insistent as a siren to her. She looked at Ryan Moore, who had slipped away from the clubhouse. His face was pale, but his eyes held a newfound resolve as he clutched a cheap prepaid phone in his trembling hands. Ryan Moore met Lily Jenkins's gaze and offered a small, reassuring nod. He pressed the phone into her palm, whispering, "I did it. The truth is safe." His voice shook with residual fear, but beneath it, Lily detected a core of steel. Titan Wolf, his brow furrowed in curiosity, caught the exchange. With the world watching through cameras, live streams, and every major news channel, Lily Jenkins took a shaky breath and climbed onto the porch railing. Her voice, barely louder than a whisper, cut through the air. "I have something to say." The crowd fell silent. Sheriff Cross's eyes narrowed, suspecting a trap, but he was unwilling to silence her under the relentless scrutiny of so many lenses. Lily Jenkins turned to Titan Wolf. "I need your speaker." Without hesitation, Titan Wolf grabbed the PA system the bikers used for rallies and plugged Lily Jenkins's phone into it. Static crackled, followed by a burst of feedback that silenced even the cicadas. On the porch, Lily Jenkins navigated to a hidden folder on her battered old phone. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks, the case held together with tape, but it had survived the night of the attack. In the chaos, as Aaron Cross had screamed and beat her, the device, tucked safely in her shirt pocket, had captured everything audio, not just video. Lily Jenkins held her breath and pressed play. Suddenly, Aaron Cross's unmistakable voice flooded the air, chilling and arrogant. It echoed across the crowd and out to every live stream. "In this town, I make the rules, not you and not your busted barcode machine." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The crowd surged forward, craning their necks to listen. More played. Aaron Cross's threats, his slurs, the sneering pride as he abused his power, then the sound of violence, the scuffle, the rip of fabric, the sobs that followed. The audio was raw, ugly, and undeniably authentic. Reporters raised their microphones, their faces grim. Phones were thrust higher, recording every agonizing detail. Some officers glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering behind their mirrored sunglasses. Sheriff Cross lunged forward, his face flushed with panic. "That's enough, turn it off. That's stolen evidence." His voice cracked, desperation seeping through his carefully constructed facade. But Lily Jenkins pressed on, her voice clear and strong for the first time in days. "You tried to erase what you did, Aaron Cross. You tried to silence me, but you forgot nothing ever really disappears. Not anymore." Titan Wolf gripped the microphone and turned to Blade Carson. "Let's finish it, Blade." With surprisingly nimble fingers, Blade Carson pulled a tablet from his saddlebag and tapped the screen. The video feed from the supermarket, retrieved from a backup by Shah and stored safely in the cloud, now streamed live onto the reporters' monitors and phones, casting its damning images across the crowd. The footage showed everything: Aaron Cross's attack, the mockery, the violence. It showed Ryan Moore caught in the act, trembling with guilt as he confessed to the setup. His words, recorded by Blade Carson's old tape recorder, added another layer of damning evidence. On every screen, Aaron Cross's face twisted from glee to fear. In the crowd, even some police officers lowered their weapons, visibly shaken by the revelation. For the first time, the town saw the real story. On the porch, Lily Jenkins's hands shook as she held the microphone. "You wanted to make me invisible. You wanted to erase my life, my family's name. But now, everyone sees, everyone knows." Aaron Cross tried to surge forward, but a wall of deputies blocked his path, no longer certain whose orders to follow. Sheriff Daniel Cross's face blanched. He grabbed for the bullhorn, his voice brittle. "None of this is admissible. It's lies, all of it." But now the bikers and the citizens alike surged forward, demanding answers, shouting for justice. The media swarmed, their cameras fixed on Lily Jenkins and Henry Jenkins, the very people the sheriff had tried to break. Ryan Moore stood at Lily Jenkins's side, his shoulders squared for the first time in memory. He raised his voice, barely more than a whisper, but clear enough to be heard. It was all a setup. Aaron Cross forced me. He threatened me and framed them all. The evidence was real, and I sent it to the cloud before he could erase it. For a moment, the world went silent. Then Titan Wolf spoke, his voice thunderous. "Law isn't about who shouts the loudest, it's about the truth that survives every attempt to kill it." On the screens, the supermarket's audio played again. Aaron Cross's voice echoed, venomous and unguarded. "In this town, I make the rules." The words rang out, louder than gunshots, reverberating across Crestwood as the last rays of sunlight faded. Sheriff Turner's jaw clenched, his face drained of color as the crowd surged with a newfound power. The truth, resurrected and broadcast for all to see, could not be buried any longer. It began not with sirens or a grand announcement, but with a knock, a single, polite knock at the sheriff's office door. Just as the sky began to lighten after the longest night Crestwood had ever seen. Sheriff Daniel Cross looked up from his desk, the sweat still cold on his brow, his fingers locked around a tumbler of cheap whiskey he hadn't dared to drink. He barely registered the dark suits behind the glass, or the gleam of the gold badges clipped to their belts. The FBI entered quietly, their presence radiating more weight than any SWAT team, more certainty than all the bluster of 1,000 town hall meetings. 2 agents produced their credentials, their words short, clear, and impossible to spin. "We have a warrant for your office, your home, and your personal effects. You are under investigation for obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law." The sheriff's face didn't change at first, but his eyes flickered, then dimmed. He didn't move. Behind him, framed photographs of a lifetime in uniform handshakes, ribbon cuttings, graduation days suddenly looked like relics of a world that no longer existed. Is this some kind of joke? Aaron Cross burst in from the hallway, his voice high and frantic, his eyes wide with the last vestiges of his arrogance. "You can't do this. My father is—" An agent cut him off, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "Your father is under arrest. You will remain in the building until you are questioned." Word traveled fast. Before noon, every major network carried the breaking news. Longtime sheriff of Crestwood in federal custody. The scroll read as images flickered across living rooms and office screens. Turner, stone-faced, was led out in handcuffs before a sea of microphones and flashing bulbs. The arrest was just the beginning. The agents moved with ruthless efficiency, collecting phones, computers, boxes of files. In the office, the sound of shredders fell silent. There was no evidence left to destroy, only secrets waiting to be unearthed. At the courthouse, prosecutors and clerks murmured in shock. Reporters took notes, their phone cameras rolling. For the first time, Turner was surrounded by men and women who would not look him in the eye, not in respect, but in fear and disbelief. No one rushed to help. The power he'd spent a lifetime building bled away with every passing moment, but the greater spectacle unfolded outside, on the steps of the courthouse. The town gathered, black, white, rich, poor, spilling from the sidewalks, climbing over barricades, drawn by the gravity of justice being served. At the center, Titan Wolf and Blade Carson stood watch. Lily Jenkins and Henry Jenkins were behind them, flanked by the silent might of the Hells Angels. Even Ryan Moore, pale but resolute, stayed with them. No one would have believed such a coalition possible only days ago. Inside, Aaron Cross sat alone in a small interrogation room, handcuffed, his eyes darting nervously. The swagger was gone, and his leg bounced uncontrollably under the table. He tried to shout at the first agent who entered, then at the second. "This is all a setup. That audio is fake. My father will fix this. I'm the victim here." But no one listened. He was forced to watch again and again the video and audio that were now viral across the nation, his own voice, his threats, his laughter. For the first time he saw himself as the world saw him, not a victim, not a hero, but a cruel and petty tyrant who believed himself untouchable. The press demanded answers. At a televised press conference, the lead FBI agent laid out the story. Crisp and devastating, a systematic abuse of power, a conspiracy to manufacture evidence, to destroy lives, to silence the innocent for personal and political gain. The law has no place for men like Sheriff Daniel Cross or his son. The agents escorted the sheriff to a waiting car. He paused only once, scanning the crowd. There were no cheers, no waves, only silence and a forest of camera phones. Henry Jenkins caught his eye, the two men holding a gaze heavy with history and consequence. It was Henry Jenkins who finally looked away, shaking his head, not in triumph but in sorrow. Aaron Cross was led out next, his wrists cuffed, his hair wild, his suit jacket askew. He howled at the cameras, cursing, threatening, promising vengeance. His words were lost in the din of flashbulbs and reporters. As he reached the courthouse steps, he locked eyes with Lily Jenkins. This time, she didn't look away. She stood tall, Henry Jenkins's hand steady on her shoulder, her arms bare at her side. Her gaze was clear and unflinching, a look not of hate or victory, but of deep and genuine pity. Aaron Cross faltered for a split second. All his rage and desperation seemed to collapse, replaced by something hollow. He realized that what he had lost was not his freedom, not even his reputation, but the very soul of vacancy behind his eyes that nothing would ever fill. The moment broke. He was pushed forward by the agents, disappearing into the belly of the courthouse. On the square, Titan Wolf leaned over and whispered to Lily Jenkins. He finally saw himself for what he was. That's more punishment than any cell could give. The courthouse doors swung shut. In the stunned silence, a single ray of sunlight pierced the grey clouds overhead, breaking the gloom that had shrouded Crestwood for too long. Across town, mothers hugged their children. Men who'd stood on opposite sides for decades shook hands, and a new wind swept the dust from old wounds. For the first time in memory, the promise of justice felt real, not just a word whispered to quiet a restless night. They had replaced the broken bulbs with warm light and buffed the floor until it stopped remembering blood. The torn poster by the cigarette rack had been swapped for a bright community flyer advertising church suppers, a job fair, and free tutoring. A new camera blinked above the counter, its red dot steady, not blinking like a failing heartbeat. The supermarket no longer echoed with emptiness. It breathed. Lily Jenkins stood where everything had fallen apart, and where, somehow, everything had started again. Her uniform was new, her name tag shone brightly. The paperback guide, rescued, cleaned, and taped along the spine, sat beside the register like a stubborn survivor. She had put a clear plastic cover over it, barring any more stains or invasive hands. She scanned a carton of milk and a loaf of bread for a regular customer, bagged it, and wished the woman a good day. The words felt steady on her tongue. When the door sighed shut, the quiet that followed wasn't hollow anymore, it was earned. A manager wandered past and offered a nervous grin. "Glad to have you back, Lily Jenkins. The store, it's better with you in it." She nodded, not out of politeness, but because she knew it was true. She didn't need anyone to announce her worth. She had lived it. The door opened. The sound of heavy boots rolled in ahead of two familiar silhouettes. A leather vest caught the light. A quiet presence filled the space. Titan Wolf and Blade Carson didn't truly belong to any one place, but their shadows seemed to fit here now, as if the store itself accepted them. Titan Wolf paused at the end of the aisle, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual and failing miserably. He seemed almost shy under the soft lights. Blade Carson lingered behind him, arms at his sides, a carved calm etched into his face. Lily Jenkins straightened, a small jolt running through her, a habit memory. And then the tension eased. The jacket she wore in her mind, the one Titan Wolf had draped over her shoulders on the worst night of her life, seemed to settle again. Not as a shield this time, but as a reminder. "Morning," Titan Wolf said softly, breaking the silence. "Heard you got the lights fixed," Titan Wolf said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate in the small space. He kept his gaze fixed somewhere over Lily's shoulder. Lily Jenkins smiled, a genuine curve of her lips that reached her eyes. "They don't flicker anymore. Makes a world of difference, you know." "Good," he grunted, a single syllable carrying the weight of his relief. He glanced at the cigarette rack, a brief flicker of longing in his eyes, then back at her, his expression almost apologetic. "Came in for a pack. Old habits die hard." She nodded, her understanding unspoken. Taking the pack, she scanned it, the beep of the register slicing through the air like a sharp, definitive sound. Titan Wolf watched the scanner as if it held some great significance, some cosmic judgment. Lily Jenkins slid the cigarettes across the polished counter, and he laid down a thick wad of folded cash, far more than the cigarettes cost. She started to push some of it back, but he shook his head, his eyes avoiding hers. "For tuition," he said, his voice firm. "Not charity, just returning a long overdue debt." Lily Jenkins breathed in, ready to argue, pride suddenly a painful hitch in her ribs. Then she slowly let the air out. "I'll take it as a promise," she said softly, "not as pity." A faint twitch pulled at the corner of Titan Wolf's mouth, the closest he'd come to a smile. "That's the only way I meant it." Blade Carson stepped forward, clearing his throat with a sound that suggested it was a deliberate act. From his pocket he produced a small, worn object, a piece of metal attached to a leather loop, a keychain smoothed by years of handling, worn smooth where a thumb might naturally rest. Etched into the metal was the Hells Angels' death head, framed by two initials, BG, Titan Wolf, and Blade Carson perhaps, or something far older, a tradition passed down within the club. Blade Carson laid it carefully on the counter, like a carefully bestowed medal. "This is for you," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Not a brand, not a claim, just a reminder that you're not alone on any road you walk around us." He paused. "This symbol can buy you a minute. Sometimes a minute is all a person needs to get clear." Lily Jenkins picked it up, her fingers tracing the outline of the death head. The metal was cool against her skin, the leather strangely warm. She turned it over in her palm, imagining it clipped to her backpack, a silent sentinel, a small weight she could carry without apology. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For the night, for this, for all of it." Titan Wolf rubbed the back of his neck, searching for the right words, something that wouldn't sound condescending. "You walked yourself out of the worst of it, Lily. We just opened a door." A father and his little boy approached the counter, the child clutching apples and a box of cereal. The boy's eyes widened, fixated on Titan Wolf and Blade Carson's tattoos, his mouth dropping open in awe. He whispered something urgent to his father. The father hushed him, embarrassed, then looked at Lily Jenkins, a question in his eyes. "Is everything safe here now?" he asked. Lily Jenkins met his gaze, her voice steady. Safer than it was, she said. We're watching out for each other. Titan Wolf took a step back, physically shrinking himself so the child wouldn't feel intimidated. Blade Carson pretended to study a magazine, his eyes fixed on a photograph of a golden retriever, though it was doubtful he saw it. The boy stopped being afraid, his curiosity winning out. They paid for their groceries and left, the bell above the door jingling softly. The door closed behind them. The quiet returned to the store, and with it, a palpable sense of ease, a pocket of peace that hadn't existed in this place before. From the end of the aisle, the store security guard, a young woman hired after the incident, raised a hand in a silent hello. Lily Jenkins waved back, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Two church ladies debated the merits of competing coupons near the freezer aisle, their voices a low murmur. A teenager stocked shelves, sneaking glances at Lily Jenkins, as if seeing something he wanted to be someone who had been knocked down and stood up anyway. Titan Wolf shifted, the leather of his vest creaking with the movement. You talk to your granddad about school every night? Lily Jenkins smiled. He's already planning the drive to campus. Says he'll polish the wheelchair like it's a Cadillac. Titan Wolf laughed, a deep rumbling sound that was both surprised and genuine. Then he sobered. The town's going to remember what happened in the way that hurts the least. That's how towns survive. The danger is they forget who did the hurting and who did the standing. Lily Jenkins nodded, her eyes unwavering. I won't forget. You better not. He reached for the cigarettes, then paused, his hand hovering over the pack. Listen, we won't walk you home. We won't loom outside your job, not anymore. That kind of protection becomes another kind of cage. He paused, looking at the keychain. But if you ever need time, 60 seconds to shut a door, to think, to call, use that. Someone will pick up. She slipped the keychain into her pocket, the weight settling like an oath. A woman in a county badge entered the store and paused, her eyes sweeping the scene. When she saw Titan Wolf, her face would once have tightened with suspicion. Today she nodded to Lily Jenkins, a barely perceptible movement, and murmured, If anyone bothers you, you call me at the office. She slipped a card across the counter, her voice low. We're doing oversight on the department, I mean it. After she left, Lily Jenkins turned the card over in her hands, her fingers tracing the official seal, a real name, a real number. Titan Wolf watched her face change, noting the subtle shift in her expression. The way hope looked different from relief, not lighter, but truer, more grounded. He placed both hands on the counter and leaned in, his eyes steady and intense. I came to buy smokes, he said, his voice low, but I walked out with a bill to pay. He paused. Remember that line you gave me outside your house about not taking pity? Keep that fire. She held his gaze, her own unwavering. I will. Blade Carson tapped the glass case near the cigarettes, as if to remind Titan Wolf of the original errand. Titan Wolf grunted, pocketed the pack, then fished out another bill, sliding it across the counter. I know it's too much, he said gruffly. College isn't a pack of smokes. Lily Jenkins tucked the money into the register, then pulled a small receipt and wrote on it in neat letters, for the future, not the past. She handed it to him like a contract, a promise. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his vest pocket as if it were sacred, a tangible representation of a debt repaid. Before they turned to leave, Titan Wolf looked at her one last time, his gaze lingering. For a moment, the haunted field came back to his eyes, the one where he had been carried, the one he had walked away from because someone refused to let him die. You don't need us to stand out front anymore, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Your courage already drew a line no one can cross. He hesitated, then spoke the words he had come to say, words that had been lodged in his throat, refusing to surface. You don't need us to protect you anymore. Your courage protected you. He tipped his chin, almost a bow, a sign of respect, and started toward the door. Blade Carson followed, then paused, tapping two fingers against the counter in a quiet farewell. The door breathed open, then side closed behind them, leaving a trail of cool air and unspoken words. The warm light of the store held, bathing everything in a soft glow. Lily Jenkins stood alone again behind the counter, but she wasn't. The store hummed, not with fear, but with the comforting sounds of ordinary life, the beep of a barcode scanner, the wobble of a shopping cart, a child's laughter echoing down aisle 3. She rested her palms on the counter, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath her hands, and let a long breath drift out. The scars hadn't vanished. They had knitted together, strengthened, become a part of her, and when she looked at the taped spine of her paperback, she no longer saw damage, but instead, she saw a binding that had survived, a testament to resilience. Lily Jenkins smiled, an unguarded, radiant smile that finally reached her eyes, the first true light in what felt like forever. A year had passed, though some scars would always linger deeper than the skin, a permanent reminder of what had been. Summer had returned to Crestwood, bringing with it its old heat and the promise of new beginnings, but the town was not the same. The courthouse no longer felt like a fortress, a looming symbol of oppression. The market no longer echoed with whispers and fearful rumors. Something had shifted, subtle but permanent, a kind of truce, hard-earned and fiercely protected by shared memory. The main square was alive with activity, banners snapping in the breeze, folding chairs arranged in neat rows, filled with neighbors and strangers who once would have crossed the street to avoid each other. At the heart of the gathering stood a small wooden stage, draped in red, white and blue bunting. The American flag bright against the broad canopy of an old oak tree, its branches providing a welcome shade. Today was the annual Veterans Commemoration Day, but the ceremony felt different this year, imbued with a new sense of hope. The air buzzed, not only with the sound of children playing, but with a palpable sense of nervous pride, a collective readiness for truth, for recognition, for the promise of beginning again. Lily Jenkins stood backstage, smoothing the sleeve of her graduation gown, the cap perched lightly on her head. The colors were bold, symbolic, the deep blue of academic accomplishment, the gold of honors, the sash of a survivor, a visible symbol of her journey. Her hair, perfectly pressed and styled, framed a face that had learned what it meant to endure, to overcome. She gripped her note cards, her thumb running nervously over the handwritten lines she'd rehearsed 100 times, the words blurring slightly under her touch. In the front row sat Henry Jenkins, his medals polished to a mirror shine, his old uniform a little too loose now, but his back ramrod straight and his eyes unclouded, filled with pride. The town had insisted he come as a guest of honor, a recognition he had initially resisted, and he had finally shyly agreed. Beside him sat Titan Wolf, his leather vest replaced by a pressed collared shirt, a concession to the formality of the event. The motorcycle club patch was gone, but the tattoos remained, a permanent record of his own battles, inked deep into his skin. As the ceremony began, the mayor offered the opening remarks, his voice amplified by the sound system. Stories of service, of sacrifice, of families who had given everything. One by one, the veterans took the stage, accepting the quiet applause with humility and grace. But when Henry Jenkins's name was called, a different energy swept through the square. A spontaneous standing ovation erupted, neighbors cheering, bikers and old soldiers saluting side by side, a united front of respect. Titan Wolf wheeled Henry Jenkins onto the stage, the two men sharing a brief glance, heavy with years of shared experience and unspoken gratitude. The mayor spoke, his voice ringing clearly through the speakers. Sergeant Henry Jenkins, for a lifetime of courage, for carrying more than his own burden, and for reminding us that dignity is not a gift, it is a duty. Henry Jenkins accepted the plaque, his hand trembling slightly, but shook his head as if to say the honor belonged to many more than himself, to all those who had served, who had sacrificed. He raised the medal to the sky, a quiet tear slipping down his cheek, a moment of raw emotion that resonated with everyone present. Then he beckoned Titan Wolf to stand beside him, sharing the spotlight, a symbol of their unlikely friendship. They stood together, a united front, a wall no storm could breach, a testament to the power of forgiveness and understanding. Then it was Lily Jenkins's turn. She approached the podium, the sun warm on her shoulders, the weight of history at her back. The crowd fell silent, every face raised, every phone recording the moment. She searched the rows, her eyes finding her grandfather, Titan Wolf, Blade Carson with his arms folded across his chest, even Shah, standing a little apart from the crowd, a small, almost hesitant smile gracing her lips at last. Lily Jenkins took a breath, her voice steady and clear as she began to speak. I stand here today as a graduate, as a granddaughter, and as someone who was almost erased by the worst parts of this town's history. She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. But I am still here, and so is my family. Not because we are better than anyone, but because people chose to stand together when it mattered most. She continued, her voice filled with passion and conviction. Justice isn't something you're given by the powerful. It's something you claim side by side, when you refuse to let anyone define your worth. She gestured towards the audience with an open hand. This stage is for every person who has ever felt small or unwanted, every person told they didn't belong. It's for those who risked their names, their futures to tell the truth. Her eyes flashed with defiance. We are more than the color of our skin, more than our uniforms, more than the scars we carry. We are a community, and our power is in our unity. She paused again, letting her words sink in. There are still battles ahead, she acknowledged. But today we shake hands not out of pity or fear, but out of real respect, out of real hope. The crowd burst into applause, louder than before, a wave of sound that washed over her. Lily Jenkins looked to her grandfather, her heart swelling with gratitude, then to Titan Wolf, who nodded, his face etched with a pride that was rough and unhidden. The final, most powerful moment belonged not to the words, but to a gesture. Henry Jenkins rolled forward and extended his hand, his knuckles gnarled with age and arthritis. Titan Wolf, his old knuckles tattooed and strong, reached out in return, their hands clasped black and white, soldier and biker, history and redemption. While the town watched, a hush falling over the crowd, Lily Jenkins stepped between them, placing a hand on each man's arm, completing the circle at last. She gazed out over the crowd, her eyes not just bright, but shining with the kind of hope that refuses to be dimmed by any night, a hope forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by resilience. In that instant, as cameras clicked and children pointed, the image was set, a handshake, firm and unbreakable, with Lily Jenkins standing tall between the past and the future. A bridge between generations, and for the first time in Crestwood, justice was not an empty promise, a distant ideal, but a living memory, a tangible reality, a light passed hand to hand, generation to generation. Justice is not something granted by the strong, by those in positions of power. It is claimed by those who refuse to bow before the darkness, who choose to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it is dangerous. Sometimes it begins with a single handshake, a simple act of connection, and with the courage to stand together side by side until the morning comes. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, bathing the town in its warm golden light, the town gathered its breath, ready for whatever challenges the future might hold, knowing that this time they would face it together, side by side, united in their commitment to justice and equality. And as this story comes to a close, what lingers isn't just the injustice that was exposed, but the courage it took to stand when silence would have been easier. This wasn't only a battle against cruelty. It was a reminder that truth, once spoken, has a way of changing everything. Thank you for staying with this journey until the very end. If this story moved you or gave you something to think about, please consider subscribing to Heart Tales so you won't miss the next story we share. I'd truly love to hear from you which moments stayed with you the most, or what would you have done in her place. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And when you're ready, continue watching the stories waiting for you on the end screen. Thank you for being part of Heart Tales.